Before we get into it, I just want to give special thanks to Audio46 for giving me this review unit of the Kennerton Heartland. Audio46 is the only authorized distributor of Kennerton headphones in the United States, and if you want to help support the channel, you can click the links below to purchase or read more about the Kennerton Heartland or other Kennerton headphones from Audio46. So, Kennerton has had its fair share of hits, from the reference-oriented GH40 to the more high-end audiophile-minded Planar edition of the Rognier. We're looking at a recently released headphone that falls squarely into the latter category, the Kennerton Heartland. It's wooden, open-back, planar, and sports a $3,469 price tag. As usual, we'll be going over its comfort, physical design, technical design, and of course, what it sounds like. But first, let's take a look at what comes in the box. You get a soft leather headphone carrying case, a drawstring carrying pouch, your Kennerton Heartland open-back planar headphones, a strap for the leather carrying case, a 4-pin to 1/4-inch unbalanced cable, a warranty card, product cards of the Kennerton catalog, a frequency response chart, and I love that Kennerton includes this, by the way, almost as much as I love the included aroma pouch. So, let's talk physical build, which is particularly relevant for a company like Kennerton. Like everything we see from the company, the Heartland's cans are made of wood. What type of wood is determined by what edition you're getting. You can get the light, Zebrano, Wenge, Babinja, or Purple Heart, which is the unit that you see here. Kinda cool fact about the Heartland is that every unit will have its own minute aesthetic idiosyncrasies as a result of the genuine wooden design. Aside from the signature wooden cans, we also see what seems to be some sort of thin but durable, maybe aluminum headband frame that's encased in what appears to be leather, a self-adjusting suspension headband, and ear pads made of lambskin and memory foam. So when it comes to fit and comfort, the Kennerton Heartland is seriously top-notch. Just look at it. Fluffy, cushy goodness on every surface that makes contact with your head. Moment of silence to demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about. Besides being soft and smooth, adding to the comfort is that the ear pads are vented, which, along with the very open back design, heavily cuts back on issues with sweat that can sometimes arise from lambskin. The self-adjusting suspension headband has excellent calibration and kept the Heartland securely suspended on my head while gracefully distributing its mass. The Heartland is somewhat heavy, but not terribly so. At 425 grams, I would qualify it at being at or maybe even slightly below average weight for the quality and price tier in which it finds itself. Also, you can laugh all you want about the aroma pouch, but it really does complete the incredibly cozy and rustic package they have going on here. The included cable is well insulated and seems like you would have to make a pretty conscious effort to damage it. In my written review, I griped that the only jack option offered by Kennerton is a 6.35mm or 1/4-inch unbalanced jack. I've since realized that this is more or less a Kennerton staple, and thus makes me feel a little more forgiving towards it. Now, moving on to the technical overview. As I've already mentioned, the operating principle behind the Heartland is an open back design with an 80mm planar driver. The magnets in the driver are semicircular in shape and feature carbon fiber tooling and an ultra-thin 20nm polyamide membrane. Also, the wooden cans come into play here as well. The wooden design offers more pleasant, resonant properties than plastic, and the ear pad thickness was designed to optimize the distance between the driver and the ear for improved imaging. Last thing I'll mention here is that at 43 ohms, the Kennerton Heartland is pretty easy to drive and doesn't require an exceptionally powerful DAC or amp. So let's get on with some of my impressions listening with the Heartland, starting with Soundstage. The Heartland doesn't have a whole lot in the way of depth, but there's a little something there. For example, pans seem to pass across my face rather than through my head. In this sense, I would say that the Heartland is a bit shallow, but avoids two-dimensional left-right linearity. Where the Heartland really excels, though, is width and, on a secondary level, height. While mono parts frequently sat on my forehead or on my scalp, hard pans were sent flying far to my sides. The Heartland seems to find its sweet spot in these extremes, creating a huge sense of distance that extended well beyond my shoulders. The up-close and personal nature of the forward image, working together with the expansive width and kind of height that emerges on the sides, leaves me with the impression that the Heartland has a particularly dramatic character, a quality I heard in its balance as well. So let's take a look at the frequency response chart provided by Kennerton. Even if you're not particularly fluent with these graphs, it's pretty clear to see that the Heartland is putting a heavy emphasis on its low end. We see a very mild sub-bass roll-off around 50 kHz, but on a subjective level, to my ears, there is virtually no roll-off here. The Heartland is utterly thunderous and routinely filled my brain with very heavy subs. Just above the sub-bass, we see a very flat response from 50 Hz all the way to just about 400 Hz. The amplified but also flat nature of the Heartland's low end seem to go a long way in giving not just an exciting bass power, but an exceptional low-end detail retrieval as well. A lot of balances that go all in on the bass like this end up squeezing details out in favor of fat, loud, and boring-sounding sine wave-like bass timbres. The Heartland, however, manages its power gracefully, offering distinct textural growls and rumbles and maintaining the idiosyncrasies of low ends from track to track. In case I haven't made it very obvious so far, the Heartland's most enticing and defining characteristic is its dark, rumbling, intense low end. Now, mid-range is really the only area where I felt a little thrown by the Heartland. Here, frequency response does a pretty good job telling the story. We see a small dip on the tail end of the low-mid region, around 450 Hz, which recovers for the center mids and then attenuates in the high mids. To my ears, the Heartland draws an unusual amount of attention to its center mids, which was good in some ways and a little strange in others. An example of something I liked about this: snare drums pop through mixes with a kind of boxy quality, which, believe it or not, I kind of mean as a good thing here. Their thumping transients were emphasized and generally just sounded nice and meaty. Now, example of something I didn't like about this center-mid balance: saxophones could noodle freely and make the most of the Heartland's reserved but also pretty pleasant treble, but would suddenly hit an awkward swell once they started veering too close into this mid-range area. Full disclosure, this is a completely personal take. I'm literally the only person at Major Hi-Fi who thought this about the Heartland's center frequency profile, and it's a subtle enough personal grievance that makes me think most listeners won't take that much issue with its mid-range. Now, finally treble, which has some pretty interesting qualities for such an otherwise tanky and stormy balance. We see a fairly consistent amplitude across low and mid treble, to generalize here, with a notable dip from 6 to 7 kHz, and some pretty considerable high treble extension relative to the rest of the higher frequencies. To put that in perspective, what I'm saying there, frequencies as high as 18 kHz share similar amplitudes to what we see from 2 to 6 kHz. Despite lower frequencies finding, frankly, much more amplitude than the upper half of the frequency spectrum, the Heartland retains a pretty surprising clarity in its high-end detail, a quality I'll venture to attribute to its extension. Cymbals and vocal air retain their uppermost details and find a glittery and wispy quality that kind of pushes like a needle through the low end's density. Like a needle, but not needling. The Heartland's high end is pretty definitively not at risk of causing pain, even for the treble sensitive. So, overall impression of the Heartland. I would concisely describe it as a dark, stormy, and dramatic headphone. The Soundstage is close to the face but has a moderate height extension and serious width. As for the balance, the Heartland is a legit top contender for bass heads in the market for audiophile headphones, or audiophiles in the market for bass headphones. It's rumbling and thunderous, and is a pretty good pick if you like to listen to your music louder than you should. I say this because the treble is detailed and present, but modest enough in amplitude to completely avoid risks of pain or fatigue. Now, while headphones like Kennerton's Heartland aren't usually to my personal, brighter tastes, there's an undeniable skill going on with the Heartland, particularly in its low end, that is going to excite a lot of listeners. You can read more about or buy the Kennerton Heartland from Audio 46 by clicking the link in the description if you want to help support the channel, which I would be very, very grateful for. If you want to see more reviews and videos like this one, feel free to like and subscribe. Anyway, this is Chris with Major Hi-Fi, and I'll see you guys next time.